brothers, let's do this and this and this. And these guys hand over the deed. And these guys, after they've been socked around a time or two, finally give in a little while and then discover we've been duped and they're back. See, it is this system that is going to become more and more prominent in your evening news. We're talking prophetically now. We're looking ahead. This doesn't make Catholic Christians bad people. Yeah. If the government of the United States does bad things, that doesn't make all Americans bad. Only the ones in the White House. We have to make a distinction, you and I, between individuals, people, and systems. Because systems usually start out with glowing words and wonderful plans and, exalted ideas, and then they get a following, and next thing you know, the tail wags the dog. Maybe you've never noticed that, If I were to pose the question, is there anyone here who owns a home? And if anyone responded, I would say, no, you don't. Because every year there are taxes due, and if something happens and you can't pay the taxes, you don't own nothing. With a capital N. See? What happens over time is that organizations get power. And then they want to tell everybody when to jump, when to bow down. You need to recognize what's going on here. There is no government on this planet who can prove that they've been around 2,000 years. But this one. I'm editing a book right now entitled What's Behind the New World Order? We're going to be furnishing photographs. You see, back in the Middle Ages, when the papacy was at its greatest power, which is going to come back, that's when the deadly wound is healed. The Pope put the crown on the heads of any king in Europe. You're going to be king, you're going to bow in front of me. Amazing stuff. When the Protestant Reformation came along, people like Napoleon, when the Pope showed up to put the crown on him, Napoleon reached out and grabbed the crown out of the Pope's hands and put it on his own head. Then he sent his general down to take the Pope prisoner. It appeared, it seemed as though the power was broken, that they were going down. And yet the book says they'll receive this deadly wound. It will appear as though, but things will turn. So most of us here were well enough acquainted with Pope John Paul II. Remember him? The guy that flew all over the world and millions of people came out to greet him and welcome him and so forth. Seemed like a pretty pleasant fellow. Well, when he died, and I don't remember what year that was, but was it 80, 90, 96? What was it? It doesn't matter.
2006.
We have a photograph. It's going to appear in this little book, What's Behind the New World Order. We have a photograph that was taken at the funeral of John Paul II. And there's the dead body of John Paul II dressed in his regalia and stretched on this bier. This is not like a coffin. He's lying on this marble and seen bodily. And guess who else appears in the photograph? Three presidents. 3 U.S. presidents and their wives kneeling down beside. Now, I'm sure somebody said, oh, this is protocol. No, 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 no. This is history. This is prophecy. This is much larger than you recognize. See, I could say more. This power is on the rise again. And prophetically, this power is going to come to the front. We'll get there. I need to erase. Crisis number 1. The disciples said to Jesus, how can we know when the time has come? And if you'll read that conversation, Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, if you'll read it for yourselves, you will see that Jesus almost immediately begins quoting from the book of Daniel. As the conversation continues, Jesus telling his disciples, giving them this catalog of things to look for, events to take place, etc., you'll find that Jesus begins quoting verbatim from the book of Daniel. And he climaxes in this conversation by saying, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, whoso readeth, let him understand. See. So some 40 plus years ago, I was impressed to really start giving some very careful time and attention to the prophecies of Daniel. And I made myself intimately acquainted with the writing in various Bible versions, authorized versions, modern, King James, you name it. I made myself acquainted. And I began to discover some very interesting but difficult things. Difficult because in my background, in my Christian background, I was given interpretations, favored interpretations that people had been holding on to for 100, 200 and more years. And as I began to examine those interpretations against what it actually said in the book of Daniel, I said, ooh, there's a problem here. No, there's not a problem. There are problems here. Difficulties. And so I began to give considerable time and attention and study. And then making a comparison with the visions given to Daniel, I found that the book of Revelation is a mirror of Daniel's visions. So I need to illustrate this simply, if I can. Daniel and John. I've asked myself in heaven 100 times, if not 1,000 times, this guy's living 600 BC. That's 2,600 years ago. What are you wasting all these visions on him for? We need the instruction. Even Daniel himself said repeatedly in his 12 chapters, I don't understand what this means. And the angel would say to him over and over again, it's not for you to understand. You're just supposed to write it down. Yeah. See? And the book closes with, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, and it's not going to be understood until the time of the end. Well, then I read Revelation. Now here's John, some 600, almost 700 years later, and he's given these visions of the end. And I'm saying, well, come on, what is this all about? We're the people that need the instruction. Why give all these visions to John and give all these visions to Daniel? And then you do a little homework. And what you find is superpower of the day. Babylon. Superpower of the day, Rome. Superpower Babylon surrounded Jerusalem, tore down the walls, destroyed the temple, took the people away. Superpower Rome surrounded the city, broke down the walls, destroyed the temple, took the people away. Babylon and Rome. When you get to the visions given to John, I see this woman. Now, woman in Bible prophecy can represent the church, either good or bad. And she's riding a beast. What are we looking for? We're looking for this time of the end when there's going to be a system that is going to marry. Looking at you. Marry the spirit, the intent. And of course, they're going to wind up taking control. That's crisis number 2. We got to deal with crisis number 1. Daniel receives his first vision in Daniel chapter 7. The first 6 chapters are the stories of, Daniel in the lion's den, the 3 worthies in the fiery furnace, etc. King Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. And when we come to the 7th chapter of the book of Daniel, Daniel receives his first vision. He's receiving 4 visions. And in this first vision, the little brochure that was handed you here, this is where he sees the 4 winds of heaven striving upon the great sea and 4 great beasts, diverse one from another, rising out of the sea. Now, what we discover if we read, just sit down and read for yourself. You don't need anyone else to work things out for you. If you just read, you'll find that this vision is comprehensive. What I mean by that is, it begins at a certain point in time, which I believe is, where we are right now, but we'll get to that. And it goes all the way to the end, and God setting up a kingdom which shall never pass away. So this is comprehensive in that when the time of the end begins, everything that's involved is symbolically represented here. But it's, you're going through lion with eagle's wings, and his eagle's wings get pulled off, and his lion's heart gets pulled out, and on and on and on. You go through all of this, and it's kind of overwhelming. And so what you want is something that's going to zoom in, we say. I'd like a bit of discussion on that point, please. I'd like some enlargement on that point. So Daniel receives his second vision. And his second vision, sure enough, enlarges upon this number one power, this lion with eagle's wings. Only in the second vision, he's not called a lion, and you don't see the eagle's wings. But what you do is compare what's going on, and you can see we're dealing with the same power. So assuming now, that's all I can do, is assume that we may be approaching, if not already arriving at, quotes, the time of the end, then these symbols have to mean something to the people living at the time all of this comes about. And so if I were to ask you, what does a lion represent? Most people would right away say King of Beasts, to which I would say, I agree. King of Beasts. I mean, okay? And eagle's wings. Never have been able to sort that one out. This is why when the president stands up, and so what you have represented here is a guy with a double dose of number one. Now, by and by, when you see the DVD later on here, World Government Forming Now, you'll see another, quotes, interpretation by the speaker of the lion representing Great Britain. As a matter of fact, I think I put that in here because I believe that. And I believe, as the speaker will bear out, that America came from Britain, et cetera, et cetera. And we, while we have been historically enemies, we have been traditionally friends and allies. See? And so I have no difficulty at all understanding that the lion with eagle's wings has something to do with an American and British alliance. But I want to get you over here to this second vision. Daniel is away on official business, and he's over in the province of Elam. So I need to just, instead of drawing this all over the board, I'm going to do it this way for you. There are two great rivers that flow through this part of the world. There's the Tigris and the Euphrates. And these rivers are mentioned in the book of Daniel, as well they should be. These rivers are the principal rivers of the Middle East, because this is virtual desert everywhere, see. As these rivers flow through almost the whole of modern Iraq, they merge just here before they flow into the upper reaches of the Persian Gulf. I'm drawing your attention here. Why? Because in the second vision given to Daniel, he says, I'm over here at Shushan in the palace in the province of Elam. Now, in modern day Iran, old Persia, that would be in the westernmost quadrant, see, of that country. But this is where Daniel was on official business. You have to remember that the Babylonian Empire or the Persian Empire at that time owned all of this real estate. So Daniel is there, and he says, I have this vision in my head. I'm on my bed, and I'm seeing things in vision. And he said, I find myself standing beside the river Ulai. That's U-L-A-I. Ulai. And I wanted to know, where's the river Ulai? And so I do my homework. And I find out that it's this little stream, little compared to some larger rivers like these, but it's nevertheless a river. And it flows for several hundred kilometers. It starts in the mountains up here and meanders and comes down here just about 30 k's south of Basra. And Basra is the second capital, Baghdad being the modern capital 1, and Basra being the modern capital number 2. And you say, well, why do they have to have two capitals? Because down here live the Shiites, who constitute 70% of the population of modern Iraq. And up here are the Sunnis, and up here are the Kurds, and the Sunnis hate the Kurds and hate the Shias. And Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, and he had the guns, and he had the money, and he had the oil. And he was persecuting the Shia or Shiites down here. Now this is Shia Islam. Sunni. I'm trying to bring your eye here to this point because in the vision, Daniel says, I see these angels talking to one another. I see this ram that has two horns, and he's butting east and north and south. He's a bully. And he's running over his neighbors. And he got by with it for a while. Daniel says, in my vision, he prospered. He made a name for himself. He says he became great. And he pushes west, and he pushes north, and he pushes south. He doesn't push east. You'll want to bear that one in mind as we go through the day. And while I'm watching this ram with two horns I see a power from the west who came across the face of the whole earth, who touched not the ground as he came, that leaves water and air. See? And he came to this ram which I'd seen standing beside the river, but before he throws him down and breaks both of these horns, Daniel sees that there are two horns, but one horn begins to grow. And it grows taller and higher than the other horn. And whatever that second higher horn does angers this power in the west. And he comes across the face of the whole earth, and he comes and he throws the ram to the ground, and he stamps on him and he breaks both his horns. Now I'm looking at you folk. I'm hoping, I'm trusting that you watch the evening news. I don't mean once a month. I mean that you're keeping up with world events. You see, this would just be unless you have an angel appear in your vision and say, now I'm going to tell you what these things represent, what they mean. And Gabriel appears to Daniel and says, I'm given orders in heaven to come and have you understand. This vision is at the time of the end. Listen, this is where this vision belongs, this ram and goat. Next point, the two horns on the ram that you saw, these are the kings of Media and Persia. Daniel's day, Medes, Persians. But at the time of the end. And you saw, and you watched, and you beheld. And then this power comes from the west. Now this is referred to in some translations as a rough goat, as a he-goat, as a male goat. But the idea is he is mad as Butch. This business of pushing and bullying and all the rest of it gets to a certain point and we've had it. So there are several ways you and I can look at this. We can. People living right now, watching the news right now. Several ways we can look at this. One, we can say, horn number one, down, broken. Saddam Hussein, gone. Horn number two, Iran. Second higher horn. Begins to rise in power and prestige and make all of these, and we can say, well, first horn is down. But if you read what it says that when the power from the west becomes really angered, moved with choler, it says, that he comes to the ram, which I'd seen standing beside the river, and he throws him down and breaks both his horns. So we can look at it and say, yeah, we took care of Saddam, and now we're going to have to come back. But this is what you need to know. 3 days ago, we brought American troops home from Iraq. The 50,000 that are left there are non-combatants. That makes them vulnerable. We have a wild man in Iraq by the name of Muqtada al-Sadr. He's a Shia cleric. The guy is a carbon copy of the Ayatollah Khomeini. I mean, the look in his eyes, all right? In 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, Muqtada al-Sadr was one of the chief